Welcome to Science Podcast AI. Today, we're diving into a groundbreaking nature study by Sven Dorkenwald and colleagues that maps the entire wiring of an adult fruit fly brain. This detailed connectome features 139,255 neurons and 50 million chemical synapses, offering fresh insights into brain structure and function. Stay tuned.
Okay, so get ready to dive into some serious science today, folks. We're talking about brains.
Brains, yeah. But not just any brains.
No, not just any brains. We're talking about fly brains.
Fly brains.
And hold on to your hats, because scientists have actually mapped out every single connection in an adult fruit fly's brain.
Like the whole thing.
The whole shebang. Every neuron, every synapse, the whole wiring diagram.
Wow. You know, for the longest time, even thinking about doing that, even with a brain as tiny as a fly's, just seemed, I don't know.
Impossible.
Yeah, basically impossible. The amount of data you'd need, it just seemed completely overwhelming.
Right. It's like trying to trace every single wire in a computer chip, but a million times more complex.
And all you have is a really, really powerful microscope.
So how did they even begin to do this?
Well, they really had to push the limits of technology. This team, they're called the Flywire Consortium. Yeah, right. So they published their results, get this, just a few days ago, on October 2nd. It was in Nature.
Nature, the journal.
Yeah, the journal Nature. And the technique they used, it's called serial section transmission electron microscopy.
Okay, try saying that 3 times fast.
Right. Serial section transmission electron microscopy. It's a mouthful, but basically they slice the fly brain super, super thin.
Like, how thin are we talking here?
Like thinner than a human hair.
Wow.
And they take pictures of each slice with an electron microscope.
Okay, so they have all these pictures. Then what?
Then it's data. Data everywhere. They ended up with petabytes of data.
Petabytes, that's a lot. Or a lot.
1 petabyte, it's like 500 billion pages of printed text.
That's insane.
Totally insane. But here's where it gets really cool. This wasn't just about getting a bunch of pretty pictures.
Yeah.
This allowed them to trace, like actually follow the path of every single neuron and see how they were connected.
So it's like instead of streets and buildings, we have neurons and synapses.
Exactly.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. But why a fly? Why not something a bit, closer to us, like a mouse or something?
Well, you might be surprised to learn that fly brains and human brains, they actually have a lot in common.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of the fundamental ways they're organized and how they function are actually pretty similar. Plus, fruit flies, Drosophila melanogaster.
Try saying that 3 times fast.
Drosophila melanogaster, right? They're kind of like the lab rats of the insect world. Scientists have been studying them forever. We know a ton about their genes, their behavior, everything.
So it's like having this detailed map of a simpler city that helps us figure out a much more complex one.
Precisely. And this map, oh man, it's revealing some really juicy secrets.
Like what?
Well, one of the things that really jumped out was just how densely packed everything is. They found over 139,000 neurons.
139,000 in a fly brain?
In a fly brain. And get ready for this, 54.5 million synapses.
No way!
Yes, way. That's actually more synapses per cubic millimeter than the human cortex.
So it's like a bustling metropolis crammed into something tiny.
Amazing. But how does it all work? Are all those connections just like randomly wired together? That's the thing, they're not. And that's what makes this so fascinating. For all that complexity, the researchers found a very clear organization. It's not just chaos in there. There are patterns.
So even though the fly brain is this crazy, intricate web, there's a logic to it, a method to the madness.
Absolutely.
Right.
And this organization, this structure, it's giving us clues about how brains process information. For instance, they found that afferent neurons, the ones bringing in sensory information, are organized in specific ways.
So like the input cables carrying data from the fly's senses, its eyes, antenna, all that.
Exactly. And these input cables are laid out in a way that makes sense for how the fly experiences the world. And it's not just the input. This organization extends to the efferent neurons too, the output signals.
The ones that tell the fly what to do, fly, eat, run away.
Exactly. And where it gets really interesting, where we really start to see how this all works, is in the connections between these inputs and outputs. That's where the real magic happens.
Yeah.
These connections, they're like the brain's information superhighway.
Yeah.
And one area that really popped out in this research, it's called the subesophageal zone.
The sub what?
Subesophageal zone, we just call it the SEZ.
Okay, the SCZ. That rings a bell. It's like this central hub in the fly brain, right?
Right, like Grand Central Station, but for sensory information. We're talking taste, touch, smell.
It's all running through the SEZ.
It is. And it's not just passing it along. The SEZ is also getting signals from the parts of the brain that control movement and actions.
So it's like making decisions.
Exactly. Eat that fruit, fly away from that swatter. It's all happening in the SEZ.
Wow, it really makes you appreciate even a fly's brain, you know? It's not just some simple on-off switch. It's processing all this information. How does it even handle it all?
That's a great question. Our brains are doing it too, right? And one of the keys is filtering.
Filtering.
Yeah, like how do you focus on one conversation in a noisy room? The brain needs to block out the irrelevant stuff.
Makes sense. So how does a fly brain do that?
Well, this is where it gets even cooler. Remember those GABAergic neurons we talked about? The ones that release GABA?
Vaguely. Remind me what they do again?
They're like the brain's chill pill. GABA inhibits the activity of other neurons.
Oh, yeah. So it's not about amplifying signals. It's about quieting things down.
Precisely. And guess what they found?
What?
Tons of these GABAergic neurons active right at the beginning of the sensory processing pathways.
So even before the brain can really process what's coming in, it's already filtering stuff out.
Exactly. Isn't that wild?
It is. It's like our brains are doing a million things we're not even aware of all the time, just to keep us functioning.
Right. And this is where the fly brain research gets really exciting. It's giving us this whole new understanding of how brains work, and that's got to apply to us too, right?
So you're saying that this tiny fly brain, it could hold the secrets to understanding, well, everything about how our brains work.
In a way, yes. I mean,
Right.
think about it. If we can figure out how specific neural circuits control behavior in flies.
We might be able to do the same for humans.
Exactly. This is huge for things like neurological disorders.
So conditions like what? Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, those are all caused by problems with these circuits.
In a way, yes. These diseases involve disruptions to how the brain processes information, how it makes decisions. The same things we're seeing in the fly brain.
So by studying flies, we could find new ways to treat these diseases in humans. It's like the fly brain is a Rosetta Stone.
It's a powerful analogy, and it's not just about diseases. This research, it raises some big questions about, well, what does it mean to be human?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Like, if we can map out all these connections and theoretically anyway, predict how a fly will behave.
It starts to feel a little bit like we're living in a deterministic universe,
Yeah.
right? Like free will is just an illusion.
Exactly. But we were talking about how dynamic the brain is, how it's constantly changing, so maybe it's not as simple as that.
Right, right. I mean, even if we had this perfect map of every neuron and synapse, there's still so much we don't know. Like, how do you map an experience, a memory? Those things change the brain too.
That's true. You can't exactly dissect a feeling, can you?
Not yet, at least.
Yeah.
But even with all that, I mean, this research is still mind-blowing. Just think what we could do if we could start to understand how these circuits work in humans.
Oh, totally. Like, imagine the possibilities for treating neurological disorders. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's.
Exactly. Things like depression, anxiety even.
Mhm.
If we could understand those on a circuit level,
It would be revolutionary.
it really would. And I think that's what's so exciting about this research. It's not just about understanding flies. It's about understanding the very essence of what makes us tick.
It's like you said earlier, the fly brain is like this Rosetta Stone. It's giving us this whole new language for understanding the brain.
And who knows what we'll find when we can finally read it fluently.
Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive for today, but it's definitely given us a lot to think about.
It has. And listeners, I have a little challenge for you. Next time you see a fly, don't swat it away just yet. Take a second to appreciate that tiny creature with its tiny brain that's helped us unlock some of the biggest secrets of the universe.
I love it. Until next time, keep those synapses firing, and we'll be back soon with another deep dive.